Good afternoon. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. Today, as part of the Miami University Alumni Association's webinar series, we present How to Beat the Bots, Navigating the Job Search in the New World of AI. Joining us today is Katie Bowling, Associate Director of Career Development in the Center for Career Exploration and Success. Welcome to you, Katie. Easy for me to say. Thank you for being here to share some good information for this sort of new world of the job search. And so for those who may be embarking on said search or already on it, hopefully you can share some useful tools with us today.
Yeah.
So just as a reminder, our live viewers can submit a question during the live webinar by clicking the Ask a Question button under the video, and we will share those during the question and answer portion. And with that, Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining. I'm super excited about the topic today. It can be really challenging to think about how do I apply for jobs in this world, and when there's a lot of unknowns, and how do I deal with this? How can I even anticipate what some of the questions and roadblocks may be? So we're going to take just a little bit of time to dive in, but by no means is this going to be a comprehensive thing. So we're just scratching the surface here today. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to do a little bit of introduction of who am I, who's sharing this information with you all. We're going to go through experts who might be worth following, because as we'll find out shortly, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but I do have some information. That's what I'm going to share today. We'll talk about what does the job search look like with AI. And then we're going to do a brief demo of how to use LinkedIn and Miami Alumni Connect to your advantage, because these are really great tools that I think many people might be somewhat familiar with, but might not know some of the hidden features. And then I'm imagining some of you may be joining because you might feel stuck in your job search, or maybe in your current role. And so we want to be able to attack what might be some of those barriers, and how can we kind of push through that and move to action. And then lastly, I'm so excited, how can we get paid appropriately? I know this can be an uncomfortable conversation for folks, so we're just going to see how we can find some information to be able to negotiate or be able to give some better context. But who am I? So I am a Miami alum. I was a psychology major, and I had no applied career plan whatsoever. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but nothing that was really in practice. And so I think it's helpful to know, because I consider myself to have had a successful career thus far. And so if you're tuning in and you're thinking, man, I just didn't have any plans, or maybe my plans changed, we're all just working through it, right? And so that was kind of my background. There's actually a whole theory in career development of career by happenstance, where you may not actually be planning for a particular role, but you fall into it, and then your next role, you just by happenstance came across it. A part of my role now is coaching current Miami students and recent alum on how to have successful outcomes, whether that's graduate school or a job, or how can we be mobile in your career over time. So if your first role out of college is not exactly what you want, how can we be mobile in that? And I'm also still trying to figure out my life, right? That's a common comment that I get from students is, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. It feels like my friends have everything together. What should I do to figure out my life? And I think it's important to know that our priorities change over time. Different seasons of life, different phases of life will allow you to kind of take stock in what's important. I know during the beginning of and throughout the first few months of COVID, there was a huge shift in different industries, right? So people are leaving one industry to join another. Priorities came more to the surface by maybe they experienced remote work for the first time. And now this is a type of job that I want to pursue, a remote opportunity. And so what we saw in many different industries, people were juggling between things. And like I said before, I'm not an expert on artificial intelligence, but I will share with you what I know so far, and we'll just kind of keep going through it. Okay, so a few experts that I have been recently following. This list can change, depending on the topic. But I think these 4 people, I have found a lot of value in their content. And so the first one, Jeremy Shifling, he is the marketing director at Khan Academy. He's passionate about AI and educational technology and also career development. So if you are watching today and you want to pull up your LinkedIn account, then I would just go ahead and check him out. He's got great energy. If you see any of the videos that he might post talking about how to use AI in your workplace or how to make your own kind of workflow more efficient for you, he's just, he's got great energy to follow. The next person, Jonathan Javier, he is the CEO and founder of Consulting. He is best known for his short form videos related to job search and using AI to your advantage. So if we have if anybody's watching is on TikTok at all, he's got a TikTok account that he'll do. Here's what your resume should look like in 60 seconds, or here's some things to avoid. If you don't have that a TikTok account, no problem. He's got stuff on YouTube. He has post things on his LinkedIn as well. But he is a great source of knowledge for how to use AI and get those really bite-sized pieces. JT O'Donnell is the CEO and founder of Work It Daily. She too does a lot of short form videos related to job search, and I found she has a lot of really great practical advice. And she has hundreds of videos on her YouTube channel. You could either search Work It Daily or you could search JT O'Donnell on YouTube. Really practical stuff. She's very encouraging, especially encouraging folks to act, because there could be a roadblock in terms of, I don't even know what I should do in my job search. So how do I push through it? So she gives some really good practical steps. And lastly, Lauren Luber is somebody I just recently started following on LinkedIn. She's the head of strategic account management at Amazon Business, and she has really, really practical tips for job searching and how should your resume look, how should you describe things. She also has a great visual component to her information too, and so another great follow if you are in that part of your job search where I'm not sure kind of what my next steps will be. So those are great for people to follow. Now, when we think about AI in general and thinking about the pros and cons, one of the pros to using AI in terms of either your own work, your own workflow, or even in your job search is that it can make your work more efficient. Mostly what people are referring to when they're talking about AI right now are these large language models, which if we have time, I'll do a quick demo of ChatGPT. Maybe you've seen that. I don't have a paid version. I'm testing out the free version myself. And so it can be really fun to test it out and insert a question and see kind of what pops up from it. And so it can make work more efficient. I've seen people use it when they're writing descriptions of their events, or if they need a list of what are 10 marketing tips I can use for, a month as I'm trying to build my business or something. So it can give some suggestions. Generally, again, I'm not an expert, but how I understand large language models like ChatGPT is it takes all information that exists on the internet and kind of compiles it together and spits out what has kind of showed up online. And so it's an efficient way to gather a lot of information. These types of tools are meant to enhance, not necessarily replace. Again, how can we, instead of laboring over a description, how can we use this really quickly to enhance our work? And one of the other pros that I see with using large language models is we learn how to ask better questions. So if you type into ChatGPT a pretty vague question, you're going to have a pretty vague answer. Maybe it's just too generic and it's not really getting at what you want. And so learning how to ask better questions, more specific questions, can help you use that tool more. But the cons of these large language models and other IA tools are the ABCs of concerns: the accuracy, bias, and confidentiality. And so the little bit that I've learned about these models, the accuracy, especially if you're using ChatGPT and you're using the free version, that only has information up to the year 2021. And so if you're looking for what's the latest information this year about this topic, it won't have that information. And so as we know, things can change really quickly. Knowledge base can change quickly. And so we may not have the most accurate answer when we're using that system. Also with bias, not necessarily with ChatGPT, but some other artificial intelligence platforms or tools, they may have bias towards whatever information that is used to input this. So we use a platform called VMock for our students, and VMock is used to have students upload their resume, and this system will give them information based on how effective their word choices are, their formatting, all these different things. And what we had to do initially to make that work is we had to build the base of information that VMock would be used for. And so we had to submit 200 plus resumes into the system to say, these are the type of resumes that we think are important in terms of format and content. And so we had to give that information to the system. So if we did not have a wide range, then the system's only going to work as good as the content that's provided. And then lastly, with confidentiality, some of these things, I've seen people use different platforms, again, kind of like our VMock, different ones, though, that when you upload your information to get feedback on it, let's say you have your phone number or email or address on there, that system now has that information. And so there's this question going around of what is the confidentiality responsibility of these different programs. And not to go too deep, but the few webinars that I've sat on about AI, they often have lawyers or attorneys there to give their feedback and say, yeah, these are some of the things that we're considering and some of the potential lawsuits that may come from it. And so, again, I'm not an expert. I don't know all the details, but another thing to just consider. Another con, unethical uses include generating original work. So what we may be seeing is people typing into ChatGPT, write a cover letter for me. And it produces this great cover letter. And maybe it sounds really great, but it's not your work. And so there may be some, what's the word I want to use? Inauthenticity, right? So it's not really your work. It's this other bot's work. And lastly, there's a tendency to blindly accept the suggestions that it gives you. And so maybe they're good suggestions, but we found it's better to use ChatGPT or something like that as an editing point or one piece of information, not the end all be all, and to be taken as truth. And so let's take a look at other ways that AI is used, either in your work itself or in the job search process. So one, we've got applicant tracking systems. Next, we have recorded interview platforms, the adoption of AI, and authenticity. So when we look at applicant tracking system, most, if not all, companies and organizations are going to use these systems. And what these systems do, particularly as it is in the job search process, is they'll use this model where you may have experienced this too, where you upload your resume onto their platform, and maybe it's a cover letter too. And instead of it first going to a human to look at all 500 applications, let's say, it's going to scan through this system. And the system first is going to scan the job post itself, find out what are the key responsibilities, the key words that this job is really looking for, and to see, do those words show up on this person's resume? And if there's not enough match, if there is, we don't see those same things like there's management experience or leadership experience or whatever it is, then that application will get thrown out of the pool. And then only the ones that have those good keywords are going to be submitted to an actual human. One thing I've been learning about these applicant tracking systems is your format also makes a difference. So if you have a very boring black and white resume with a single column of information, you typed it up in Word, very simple, those are the best resumes that are going to make it through these tracking systems. The tracking systems do not typically pick up on text boxes or logos, icons, two columns that can also influence the system. So you may have all the right words, all those buzzwords, those keywords on there that match the job description. But if it's presented in a way that has these different logos, icons, text boxes, columns, things like that, that format interferes with the system. And so then your resume is going to get thrown out because of the format, not necessarily because of the content. And so where I see most most of the students that have a trouble with this, they tend to use things like Canva. If you go on to Canva or even some like Google templates for a resume, most of them have a spot for your headshot and 2 columns and all these icons to show this is my phone number, this is my address, this is this. None of those are going to make it through these tracking systems. And so it's very misleading to use those kind of templates. Next, these recorded interview platforms. If I was all in a room with you all on the call, I would ask you to raise your hand and say, I've used this recorded interview platforms. How many of you have done that in an interview before? And I think many of you have. While this may be a newer thing, it's really happened before we all started working remotely, more holistically. It's a very efficient way for an organization to get through many different interviews. And so sometimes what they'll use are these different platforms that can evaluate the quality of the responses. So those things may come from your eye tracking. There are some things that will track your eye as you're going through your response. And if you don't have enough eye contact, if you're staring off into space or down at your phone or whatever, it's going to pick up on those things. It may also count how many ums and ahs and filler words too. And so again, it's evaluating the person as they're speaking. And so it's good to have practice in that, right? How can we be more efficient? But it can definitely influence people as they're using this. One tip that I give students when they are doing these recorded interview platforms or these virtual platforms is that you really have to have a lot of energy as you're presenting, because through a screen, that energy doesn't translate as well. So you might have to go a little bit more excited as you're talking to really communicate your interest through these kind of platforms. Next, there are companies that have different varying levels of how they use AI in the role. Some companies love it. They want everybody to use it and make their work efficient and really embrace it. And some have no interest. They're going to reject it at all costs. And so I've heard from some of these other webinars about AI that I've sat through is that it's not likely that your role will be replaced by AI, but it is likely that your role may be replaced by someone who is using AI. So if they are using that to make their role more efficient, if they're cutting down the amount of time it takes to complete a project because they're using these different systems or organizing a spreadsheet or whatever, the company wants to hire those people who are more efficient, right? And so, but not all have that thought. Some are very hesitant to use AI, and I think there's good reason for that. And so that could be a question that you ask in an interview is, what is your company's position on using AI? Does anybody do that in their work now? How do you see that landscape changing for this particular role? And going back to that, writing that cover letter, using ChatGPT to write your cover letter, hiring managers can absolutely tell if you wrote your own cover letter and resume. By the time they get to the interview itself, they're going to have a conversation with you, the human. And if your speech and your awareness of your experience doesn't really match up to what is lovely written in your cover letter, they're going to tell. They're going to tell that there's a difference here and there's some inauthenticity in this piece. And so not a whole, this isn't the whole kit and caboodle of AI, but here's just a brief things to be aware of as you're going through your job search. So how do you actually beat these bots? So we have talked about your resume having those different keywords. I know that job postings can be really challenging to read sometimes. They might be really long or they might be really vague. And so it's helpful to see who do you know that does that type of work and have some other conversations. In short, nothing's going to replace your network. Your network will still have a lasting impact. And how do you have these genuine, authentic connections and conversations with people? A human-centered approach in hiring practices still reigns supreme. So while it may be efficient to weed out some resumes that may not be in alignment with what the job posting is, you're still going to work with people. You're going to be how do I be a good teammate? How can I contribute meaningfully and authentically? And so that's still going to be central at some point during that hiring process. And so there's two ways that we can really dive into to use your network. One is LinkedIn. Another is Miami Alumni Connect. There may be some other platforms out there, but these are pretty well known. And so I want to do a brief demo of how I use LinkedIn personally, and also how I'm sharing with students. So give me a moment. I'm going to switch my screens here. Okay, so here's my my LinkedIn homepage, and I use mostly when I use this function, I'm going straight to the search bar. And so I'll type in the search bar, in this case, Miami University, and I'm going to go straight to Miami's page. Now, this may be a familiar site for you, or maybe this is the first time you're kind of diving into LinkedIn. And so there's lots of different things that you can follow, the latest news, what's happening here, some job postings. But where I use this the most is actually up here in this alumni section. So we've got home, about, post, jobs, and alumni. If we click on the alumni, we can sort people who have Miami on their profile in some capacity based off of where they work, where they live, what they do, what they're skilled at, what they studied, how you're connected, lots of great things. So typically what I'll use is what did they study and what are they doing now? So for me as a psychology major, I'll say, okay, I see that's already listed here. So let's see who are all the psych majors that are on LinkedIn that have Miami on their profile. And then what are they doing? Where are they working? So if I scroll down, they're in lots of different places, but let's just see in this case of JP Morgan Chase, let's say. If I continue to scroll down, here are all these folks that have psychology on their profile and JP Morgan Chase. And so I might say, okay, if I want to know what's it like to work at JP Morgan and as a psych major, how do I do that? I can click on one of these people and start a conversation. So let's say I use Jana here. And I don't know Jana personally. This is a person I'm randomly selecting here. Looks like, okay, Vice President of Events Management in Columbus. If I scroll down, has been at JP Morgan Chase for 13 years. Was at Cardinal Health before that, and the American Cancer Society. And then check out this this major here, creative writing and psychology. How does a creative writing and psychology major end up at JP Morgan Chase, right? I'm so curious to find that out. Maybe it's not the typical role you may assume for a psych major. And so what I can do is click more here and then click this connect button. And now I have the option to, I could just send this, but that's going to be pretty weird for Jana to have this random invitation for someone that she doesn't know in her inbox. And so how can I make this more personal? I'm going to add a note, and I have just a few words that I can use, only 300 words. So I'm going to keep it short and brief. But what I do want to do is first connect. How are the ways that we are similar? What are the things that we might be aligned on? And then what specific question do I have? If you just send a note that says, oh, excited to connect, it doesn't really inspire a conversation or a response. I could just say, okay, yep, I accept. And then there's the end of that kind of networking opportunity. So what I might say with Jana and say, hey, Jana, my name is Katie. I see that you were a psych major at Miami. I also was a psychology major, and I'm thinking about changing industries, but I don't know the first thing about getting into like a financial industry. I've seen you worked at JP Morgan for, 13 years. I'd love to know, how did you get into that? How did you start that? Or maybe a question is, what do you like most about your job? Or how did you know JP Morgan was for you? How did you even consider something like this? What was your path, right? And so you can read a little bit on their profile, but having that extra communication is really helpful in terms of building these what's seemingly random networking opportunities. This also works if you go, instead of using Miami University as the base of the platform, you could also use the particular company. So let's say you went to, I forget that we know Jana now here. Let's say, man, I've always wanted to work at JP Morgan Chase. This is also not an ad for JP Morgan Chase. This is just one that I chose. But we have the similar options here: home, about, post, life. And instead of alumni, we see people. So now we can click on people here. And instead of sorting by their major, what we could sort is where they studied. I think we got that right back once, right? Yep, where they study. So maybe I can see that show more, and Miami University doesn't show up right away, but I'm going to type it into the search bar right here. So now we've got Miami showing up right here, 620 Miami alums that have a LinkedIn account and have put it on here to show that they're from Miami. They are working at JP Morgan. And now I can see here's all these people who are at Miami. I've got that connection with them. You can see these first few are going to be people that I have mutual connections with. But this is the whole list of people that have that on their profile. Incredible. Again, we can use the same format of connecting, adding a note. And so this can be really useful for you if you are looking to maybe jump into a new industry or jump into a specific employer, and you want to see, man, have they hired Miami folks before? I want to check that out. If they have, I can say this is a pretty great likelihood that they're going to see, oh, wow, we've got Miami alums here. They're kicking butt. They're doing great work for us, and we would love to hire more Miami alums because of the reputation that Miami has or their experience with Miami alums. And so that you can even bring that up in your connecting part. So if you reach out to somebody, let's say they don't go to Miami, but they're one of the hiring managers at this organization, you can say, hey, I've noticed that you have a ton of Miami alums that have worked in your space. LinkedIn's showing 620 alumni from Miami that work here. I'd love to connect. I'm also a Miami alum. I would love to contribute to your organization. That's a great way to do that. So let's move on a little bit from LinkedIn. And now let's take a look at Miami Alumni Connect. I won't go through all the features that Miami Alumni Connect has, but it is very robust, and I think it's often underutilized. And so I want to take this time to showcase what it has to offer and where I use it most for either myself or when I'm working with students. So things to know about Miami Alumni Connect. It's very similar to LinkedIn in the sense of you can connect with people. You're going to have this professional profile. You're going to have groups here. You might be able to post jobs or even apply for jobs or see the opportunities that are available for you. But it's different from LinkedIn because this is a curated list of Miami folks. So these are your people. The experience that I have had with it is a student may be interested in having one of these kind of networking conversations. And so they might reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, but unless you're a career advisor like me, or if you're on the job hunt, you may never look at LinkedIn. It may not be something that's on the top of your mind. So someone may reach out to a person on LinkedIn and never hear back from them. What my experience has been with Miami Alumni Connect is that the people who are in the system, they're self-selecting in. They're raising their hand and saying, use me as a resource. I want to connect with you as a student, or I want to connect with you as a fellow alumni, and be able to share my knowledge or just connect in a more meaningful way. And so these people are going to be more responsive when you reach out to them. So a way that I use this, you see a lot of the similar features. I'm right now on the network portion. There's different things that you can look at, opportunities, groups. So if you're a part of different things on campus, or when you were on campus, you might be able to find some common things with some of these groups. There's a discussion, there's resources. We can get to the main alumni page from here too, but really where I spend most of my time is on this network section. And so what I've done, what's been especially helpful for students is using this More Filters app, specifically the help topic. And so a common thing that I hear from students is, I want to job shadow somebody. I want to see what does it look like to do the job they're doing. And so if we click on this job shadowing and hit apply, now we're going to have all of the folks that are Miami alum that are on this page that are saying, yeah, you can totally come shadow me. This is really helpful for students. And I've found it's really meaningful for alumni too, because I've talked to a lot of Miami alums who are just eager to give back and are excited about connecting with the next generation of Miami alums. And so it's been a really cool thing to see. But I can go through here and again, let's say I click on this Brad guy. I don't know who this person is. First time I'm looking at his profile, but it has a similar, and not exact, but a similar look to LinkedIn, a little bit of the background. Here's all the different help topics he's willing to chat about. Was on Oxford's campus. Sometimes you'll show different like clubs and organizations down here. But the same way as LinkedIn, you can click message, and now we can build a networking connection. So we can either set up a mentorship, or I think what's most popular is sending this message request. So we can do that. We can just write a blank message, or maybe you're not exactly sure, how do I draft that? And so there are some suggestions here. If you're exploring your career, here's something that might be helpful for you, a brief template. Or maybe you're just looking to expand your network, and so here's another template. Or let's say you actually know Brad, you guys were buddies, and so, hey, it's been so long, I can't believe we haven't connected. Are you going to the alumni weekend this year, right? So there's a couple different options that you can use as alums yourself. And if you sign into Miami Alumni Connect and create an account, then you may get these same messages from students looking to connect. But very simple to use. We can send that message and kind of go from there. So those are two really simple ways to connect. I know it can be kind of intimidating for folks to build their network out of seemingly thin air, but this Miami Alumni Connect is making it easy for you to do that. And LinkedIn is a similar way as well. So let's get back to our beating the bots here. And let's go into our feeling stuck. So I'm imagining that some of you may be joining today because you feel stuck in where your career is, or just know, what's my next step? How do I, get through here? And so maybe you're finding that you're not getting any interviews, and that may be because the resume might not be passing that applicant tracking system like we talked about earlier. And so one of your ways to kind of get unstuck from that is reviewing your resume. Take a look at, is this with a lot of text boxes? Am I not really hitting the mark on describing my experience? It may be time to do a refresh of your resume. Maybe you're not finding jobs that you're interested in. Maybe you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Nothing sounds interesting to me. And so one thing you may consider is this the right environment? Maybe I do like this job title that I have. I do like the work, but this organization's not the best fit for me. And so rather than totally switching industries, maybe it's more of, okay, I want to work in a smaller organization, or I want to work in a big corporation, or I want to take my skills into a nonprofit org, let's say, or maybe I want to go into teaching or something, right? So there might be a different environment that might work better for your same role. And I talk with a lot of folks that are just scared to leave their current job, right? I'm really comfortable in this. I don't think I can quite make that next step. Totally understandable. I've absolutely been in those shoes before. And so something that you may consider is, how can I prototype a new life or a new job? So what that might look like is, let's say, okay, I'm a career advisor, and let's say I've always wanted to be in construction and build homes and design homes. That is a genuine interest in mine, but I don't have the credentials to do that. So how could I prototype getting some of that experience? Maybe I test out, okay, I'm going to volunteer for Habitat for Humanity on the weekends and start to build those skills, because eventually I want to go into that, but I can't make that full switch right now. And so brainstorming some ideas of how can we do that can be helpful in just getting you inspired again and getting out of the rut of, I'm stuck in this spot and I can't really move forward from here. I've actually have used Chat GPT to think about this. I was working with one of my friends casually. It was not an official thing. And I said, why don't we just use Chat GPT to think, like, what are some different things that you could use or different things that you could explore with what your degree are. And so let me see if I can pull it up. Let me see. I have it listed, and if I can switch it over, we'll show you there. Yeah, perfect. Okay, let me switch around. Okay, so here is what Chat GPT looks like. We can type different kind of questions down here and under this send a message. So I typed in a bachelor's degree in geology, or what are jobs someone with a bachelor's degree in geology can do? And then it spits out all these different things. Okay, environmental geologist, petroleum geologist, hydrologist, all these things. We all know I was not a geology student, so these are all new things to me, right? But we can use this to type in something else. So maybe I want to say, what can I do with a psychology degree? And I hit enter. It goes down to the bottom. And here it is in real time. Here are some things that you can do, right? So maybe for you, you want to type in, I don't know, I've got this skill in sales, but I want to apply it to some other industry. What industries use sales, right? So it's really kind of fun to take a look at this. And we could even type, I know some of you have submitted some questions prior to, and so we can just dump those questions right into ChatGPT and see what comes up for you. And again, we got to remember, it may not be the best information, but could it spark an interest? Could it spark some imagination for you? So we'll stop and I'll switch back over to the presentation here so we can keep going on. So our next section, compensation research. How do I know that I am getting paid what I should be paid? How can I negotiate? A lot of that is based in what value do I add? How can I create work, meaningful work for this organization? How can I improve efficiency, right? So a lot of your own skills, but you may be like I often was, have no idea what's the going rate for this industry or this thing. So a couple of resources that I use, Glassdoor is a really popular one. You can see here, this is just right off of their homepage of Glassdoor. You can type in what's your job title in that location and what's the going rate for that. That's one way to do it. You can also look at different companies. So let's say we use that JP Morgan example. You can go to their company's page on Glassdoor, and not only does it show salaries for different positions, but it also shares a bit of information from people who have worked in those things. Did you like working here? What were the challenges that you faced? What do you think about the direction this company is moving? Were you compensated fairly? And so you can read some information about that and use that to your advantage. Next, some transparency laws, pay transparency laws. This is a list of states and sometimes regions or cities where pay transparency laws are in effect. And so let's say you want to have a human resource position, but you have no idea what it pays. They didn't put the pay on the job posting, which can be very frustrating for sure. So you can go to one of these states. Let's say you look up that kind of job title and that same size company. If it's a medium-sized company, find another medium-sized company in that state, and then see what is that paying for, right? So some of these pay transparency laws state that you have to list the compensation in the job post itself. Some of them say you have to mention it in the first round interview. So there's slightly different laws that talk about this, but this could be a good starting point. And then, because we know the cost of living in California is not the same as it is in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so what you would then use is a cost of living calculator and say, okay, in California, this role was $100,000 in San Francisco. And how does that translate to Cincinnati? Okay, well, now it translates to $60,000 or something like that. And now that can be my negotiating. I know the going rate in the Cincinnati area is this, and so this is what I'm asking for. Lastly, what you can do is if you're looking for a higher paying job, maybe you search for the role that you want in a higher paying industry. Again, going back to that human resource example, or you could say marketing, social media, those type of things, that exists in a lot, if not all industries. So maybe you just take that same role and you look at what are higher paid industries. And so I actually did use ChatGPT to generate this list. What are the highest paid industries in the last 10 years? And so technology, healthcare, finance, law. So I just need to find a role, but in a company that is within that industry. And that can often be a way to increase your compensation. I think I've just gone, again, skimming the surface here, but would love to hear what any of your thoughts are or your comments, or if you have any questions.
Thank you, Katie. That was super good information. honestly, it makes me feel like some relief that I'm not actively looking for a job. I can understand why people feel so
It can be stressful.
overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yes, and stressful during the process of trying to find what fits with you and what fits with your skills. So we're really glad that you're here to sort of shed a little light on a couple of these topics. So we have a live question that
Okay.
came in. And this is related to sort of the beginning, what you touched on, the applicant tracking systems.
Mm-hmm.
And Alyssa wants to know, are these really popular, and what is the frequency that like a smaller company, and I'm not really sure what exactly a smaller company is in this
Right.
instance, but do we have some statistics on who is or isn't using this kind of technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have exact numbers on that. What I do know, and where you can tell if they're using an applicant tracking system, is if they say upload your resume to this platform, then usually that platform has those things built into it. So I forgot, like, what's a popular one? It's like WorkPay, I think, is one that, like, when you upload onto WorkPay or something, that's a system. There's several out there. I would say the times when they are not using that is probably really small. Like you're mentioning, the small companies that maybe they don't have the capacity to use these kind of tools. But I would say most are. I mean, if you're submitting your resume through email, that's another popular way people can apply for jobs, then not likely that they're using that. But even good practice is to make sure that your resume, your experience aligns with that job. So even if you're not using this applicant tracking system, in order to maximize your opportunities, you want to showcase, you want to make it really easy to that employer. I've got these skills. Here's where I've used them. Maybe it's in a different context, but I've still developed these skills. And so you want to make that connection for them, do the work for them in that way.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you for that. Good tips. So here's sort of a related question. This is coming from Darcy. They ask, let's see, with the growing automated job searches and marketing, what new responsibilities and ethics should hiring managers and companies apply?
Yeah, amazing question. And I think people are figuring that out as we speak. What are the things that we need to be aware of? I did touch briefly on it about what are some biases that may exist in the systems that we use. One of the things that one of the webinars I sat in on a couple weeks ago was some of these systems, particularly the interviewing systems when they're using video, a lot of those systems were not tested with people who have darker skin. And so what are we missing on some of these things? And so that's an ethical question that people are using. They just weren't tested or didn't have enough people in that testing section. So again, people are still working on how can we make these systems less biased. And I mean, there's still, in general, biases that exist, right? So maybe a name might suggest something for somebody, or I mean, we could go on and on about implicit bias, but definitely something that is considered. I do think in terms of what kind of work is being produced, how are we using AI to produce work? Can we claim it as our own? Do we have to cite the resource? What does that look like? So that's not necessarily in the hiring process, but more in the ethical practices of using this in work as itself. And I think with anything, having people who are dedicated to evaluating these processes, whether it is in the job process, which I know a lot of human resources, that's their whole role. Did we write this job description in a way that is inherently discriminatory, right? That's a problem. And so if there are dedicated people to really evaluate, critically think, is this available for all people, or is this unethical? We have to have people who are paying attention to that.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question that just came in. I think probably a good one. Tony asks, are there, and what are they, the benefits or trade-offs to working with a recruitment firm or a staffing agency? Does that sort of change the landscape, and how?
Yeah, great question. It's always nice to have somebody in your corner, right? And if you're recruiting is challenging. It is really tough. I've had a few friends who are recruiters, and it's hard to find people. It's hard to find people who want to do that job, or even just maybe you're a not well-known company, how do you get people to look at you? So when those companies are using recruiters, it's great to have somebody in your corner. It can be challenging. I mean, some of the challenges I've experienced with some of my friends using recruiters is they might be compensated based on how many people they can produce to you. So they might just be throwing people in. It can be challenging to know because if their role is determined by how many people actually get presented to these folks, then maybe they have like a quota or something. I'd like to think that that's not it. I'd like to think that these recruiters are experts at finding who's the right fit. But I would say it depends on what is your what's your tipping point for, do you want to pay for this service? Do you want to have a headhunter? Me personally, I would probably try to do everything I can before I can get to a paid service, right? I want to see what can I use in my own strength. And then if I am really having a hard time, then yeah, I might need that additional support. The things that I showed today, so the LinkedIn and the Miami Alumni Connect, I don't have a paid platform on LinkedIn. I don't have that premium account. So all these things you can do just without anything paid. I do know there are some features on LinkedIn that can help you make those connections on that paid service. So maybe trying that route first might be more helpful.
Awesome. And thank you for saying that piece about the paid premium LinkedIn, because I think there are folks out there who, sort of don't know that the traditional free version will work for them, sort of equally well. And that sort of the premium version is sort of like second line of defense. And then, of course, all those other tools available. So thank you for that bit about recruiters and, maybe use that as a secondary line of offense, if you will. So transitioning a little bit, and this has actually come up in my news feed on my social media with a couple people my age. I'm in my early 40s, but I think this is a transition time for women, especially who maybe have been at home raising children, who don't have those same sets of, real ironclad skills that you can prove, by virtue of having been at a company or in a position for a long time. So what about those like soft skills that like moms have, or that you've built managing your household or in some other way? How do you leverage those and how do you sell those to somebody who doesn't see sort of the ins and outs of all of the skill set that you have?
Yeah, amazing question. I'm going to stop sharing here so it feels more conversational. A great question. I've actually recently worked with an alumni who's been out of the working game for quite some time. Now, did do some work ahead of time before she started spending more intentional time at home. And there's a couple things that we can do. One, we can really lean into what were some of those things that you did in the past. Also, what were some, maybe you volunteered at a space. So in her case, she had volunteered at her church, and she also did some like parent groups at the school. And so what are some things that's not necessarily paid experience, but you can kind of quantify these different things. I've also seen, and I have, I think there's probably mixed opinions on this, but I have seen people who will put something on their resume that says like this professional break to raise their kids. And then here's what I was doing in the meantime. I think some people may be really open to seeing that and can appreciate that. And then others may think this is really personal and probably shouldn't belong in here. It really should be professional experience. And so I do think that's hard to navigate. But if you can find other spaces where you've said, yeah, I've done this volunteer work, I've done this other contribution, or maybe you were a team manager or something for your kid's soccer team or something. So how can we list that? I guess I was a team manager. Sure, it was a volunteer opportunity, but here's where I had to, communicate and attention to detail and strong work ethic and those kind of things. And then absolutely in a cover letter or in an interview, you can mention these things like, yes, I took an intentional break. And sometimes it's not to raise kids. It may be to care for an aging parent or something, and say, this is, this is not something I chose, but it's something that I needed to do. This is what I learned in that process. This is what I valued. My priorities are now realigned. And so I'm being very intentional about what are the jobs that I'm applying for. I need to make sure that it can be flexible, or I need to I realized that life is short, and so I really want to pursue this job that I've always wanted, but didn't necessarily have the courage to pursue. And so I think you can definitely. I'm always a fan of erring on the side of authenticity and sharing your story. You don't need to overshare, but to say like, yeah, this is the reality of what happened, but this is what I can contribute. I've developed these skills, I've enhanced these skills, or after taking this kind of professional break, I'm really energized to re-enter the field. And so I think there's ways to communicate that.
Awesome. Well, I think all work is important work, and being able to articulate what is maybe perceived as unconventional work and skills built from that work, I think is a daunting task for a lot of folks who have been out for whatever reason from the conventional workforce. Okay, just a couple left, wrapping up here. So we were talking about keywords and bots, and is there a best way to determine, or are there best keywords to put in sort of these documents that are likely to catch the attention?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you find a job posting that has bullet points of these are the responsibilities, oftentimes that very first word in that bullet point is going to be those keywords. So if it's in this role, you're going to analyze data of this and this and this set. You're going to communicate with key stakeholders too, blah, 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 blah. So now on your resume, you're writing, here's where I've had experience in analyzing data. And maybe it wasn't for this esports company, but it was for, this other data set. In higher ed, I analyze data on retention outcomes or something. So maybe the content is different, but the skill of analyzing data is still there. And so you don't need to falsify your resume by saying, yes, I've had this exact experience, but even using that same phrasing, analyze data, communicate with key stakeholders, those oftentimes it's those lead off words that are your key things. Other things to consider too is if there's a particular platform or software that they use, if you have experience using that, put it on your resume. So I know a while ago, it was really long time ago, it was standard to say the skills that I have. I know Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. And then there was a time where it's like, no, everybody knows that, so you don't need to put it on there. But now it's coming back to not everybody actually does know that. And a lot of people are using the Google Suite and they're more familiar with that. And so what's the platform that you have used, whether it's in your own personal, I've seen people put on, like, I taught myself how to use Photoshop. And so maybe I didn't use that in a professional setting, but yes, I have experience with this. Those things can also be like the keywords that they're looking for.
Excellent. So lots of tickets to win it in the action words.
Yeah.
Those words that like indicate what you do. Actually. Okay, one last question here. And this feels like a real slippery slope that I have a feeling you're going to be like, I don't know. Can you use ChatGPT during the interview process? Now, I would imagine that's one of these like recorded interview platforms, but I bet that sort of harkens to that bit you said about the eye contact.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, slippery slope. Totally. I think there's a couple things to consider here. If you, I think people can pick up on if you know your stuff or not. And so if you are depending on an outside resource, if you're using to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure how you could use ChatGPT. Like maybe if let's say you and I are interviewing right now and you ask me this question, I don't know how to respond to it. And I quickly type it into ChatGPT. Well, you all saw how, it was quick. But if I'm like, can you just wait one moment while and then I got to read it, right? It's going to feel very awkward, right? But if there are, I definitely think you could use it in preparing for an interview, right? So if there are some common questions that you're like, I'm not really sure how to answer the tell me about yourself question, then maybe you type it in there. And again, using it as a piece of information, not as your script. And this is even if you didn't use ChatGPT, if you're reading from a script, people can tell. And they don't want to hire a human bot. They want to hire a real human, right? They want to work with somebody. And so again, I think authenticity always reads. I'm trying to think of other ways you might be able to use ChatGPT or another kind of AI thing. I just am not sure how smooth that would be. I think it would feel kind of forced. And so I guess my suggestion would be if you do want to use these kind of tools, then you really need to study how they're used and how they function so that it's natural for you and it's not a crutch. But I think it's going to drastically change how people work in the future. And like I said, there's some people that are already really embracing AI. I watched this other talk about how educators are going to have to change their assignments so that students are learning differently. So instead of saying, don't use Chat GPT to write this essay, they're saying, use AI to write an essay, and then in class, bring the essay and we're going to edit it in class, and you're going to be graded on the editing piece of it. And so it's, again, like, how can we use our human brains? So I think we're going to see a totally different world of work, but everyone's learning it. So no one really knows.
And I think at this point, it really sounds much better to use as like a consultation piece.
Yeah, I think so.
Offer you a little bit of guidance to tighten up maybe whatever authentic pieces of skill set and information that you bring to the table. That's really good to know. And honestly, prior to you really mentioning sort of how AI intersects with finding a job and all those things, it didn't really even occur to me. And I guess that's because I'm ultra middle-aged suddenly and haven't been looking for a job, but it is different. Like the world of finding a job is so quickly changed. And this has been really helpful, Katie. Thank you so much.
I'm glad
today. This has been really enlightening, even to somebody who isn't presently looking for a job. So I hope that our viewers took away some tools. Thank you again for being with us. As a reminder for anyone who might want to go back and sort of reference this great information that Katie has shared with us, you can watch this recording later this afternoon on our website. You can find that at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Thank you all for joining us. And if you're interested in checking out Miami Alumni Connect for exclusive Miami connections, you can visit connect.miamialum.org. So thanks so much, Katie.
Thank
happy
you.
day to you. Happy hump day, I guess, since it's Wednesday. And I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Love and honor, everyone. Have a great afternoon.